Hi everybody, I'm going to briefly run through an entire all-day workshop that I do with students in about 5 minutes here, but you'll get the idea. And the theme behind it is you're in charge, and the idea is that we're going to put students in charge of developing all of the rules that they have to live by in terms of how and when and why to use technology. So this is developing internet user agreements, how and when and why to use cell phones, you name it. And there is a particular emphasis here on new and emerging technologies because there are technologies that are going to come along here any day and challenge all of the digital citizenship kinds of rules and regulations that we have put in place. And behind all of this is my observation over the years that if you are not framing the system, you are gaming the system. And by that I mean if we leave students out of the policy-making process and just sort of sideline them and we, the adults, come along and make up all the rules, the tendency is to figure out how to get around the rules. Whereas if we bring them to the policy table and say we need your input and you can go ahead and develop those guidelines with our help, with our oversight, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with, but putting them in charge at the table, then they are going to be much more likely to observe the rules that are developed. And not only that, but you give students an opportunity to think and talk about those issues that are largely invisible to them and those rules that are largely imposed upon them. And if we really want them to become ethical human beings, we need to give them chances to think ethically. And this is a great way to do it, a very practical way to do it. So I begin with something called the math hat. Now, supposedly, this actually exists, and this is already coming up on a year old. And I'm going to assume they've fixed just how ugly that is. But in any event, the idea here is we can wear something that actually improves our ability to do math. So the question to students is, should we allow the math hat in school, and under what conditions? Go. And they come up with fascinating considerations in terms of equity and whether we should just accept people at their particular levels of math. And it's just always a fascinating debrief with the students following that. Same thing with Google Glass, or what I like to call eyeglasses. We're going to have those, and they're going to be, right now they're expensive, but they're going to be less expensive. They'll be competitors. And say they were free, should we have them? And I show them all sorts of videos about how to live stream from Google Glass, and the fact that we're going to be able to have conversations with people and they're not even going to know that we're live streaming them, and how we might be able to use those at school, and the upsides and the downsides of that. So I have them always identify with each one of these 3 opportunities and 3 cautions, and then they develop the rules and repercussions. Digital footprint. We hear a lot about that, and I like to also call it your online scrapbook, a term that I got from Helen Barrett, because it really is an online scrapbook. We're sort of leaving pieces of ourselves online, and others come along and sort of view it as our online scrapbook. Well, unfortunately, digital footprints are viewed rather negatively, and it's really it's imbalanced, and the concern is that we're going to say things and do things and leave things online that we're going to regret going forward. And that is absolutely part of it, and I show students videos about those things. But we can also see digital footprints as our chance to shine. So if we can't hide anymore and the world is going to see us, then just what do we want them to see? So let's flip it around and let's look at this as your digital opportunity. And so your digital footprint becomes your opportunity to put out there in some organized, aesthetic, articulate, well-researched fashion all of the cool stuff that you do. So let's flip that around, and I give students an hour or so to identify what it is they would want in their digital footprint, where they might get that stuff. And there's all sorts of stuff that until someone comes along and says, we want you to gather all of your really cool stuff, they don't even really realize it's there because they're not creating it for that purpose. Mantras, mottos, and brands. Branding digital citizenship in a sense. And we talk about what's a brand and so on. But here's the deal. Guy Kawasaki says that he could walk into any organization, ask people what the mission statement is, and nobody knows. Why is that? Because it's too long. And he says that every organization needs some kind of mantra. So I have worked with a number of schools, policymakers, and so on, and groups of students to develop a one-sentence mantra or motto or brand that captures their view of digital citizenship. So we take, you can spend all day, you can spend all week, but usually it's about an hour, and we sort of start out with the obvious stuff. So someone says, well, it might be use the internet safely, respectfully, responsibly. That's good. Then people come along and they add things, and they say, well, you know what, to me it's all about being honest and fair and protective. That is, protecting yourself, protecting your friends, and so on. There are those people, particularly adults, who think we ought to help students begin to use the word appropriate. It's one of those words without which we can't discuss any of the gray areas of life. So we might as well go ahead and begin doing that sooner rather than later. Then there are the pragmatists that just say, is that publishable? Is something that somebody is doing publishable? Or what is its positive and or negative impact on the digital footprint? And just so you understand, the idea here is that we have this one sentence that sort of runs digital citizenship in a school, and it allows, everybody knows it because it's only a sentence. And so a teacher can look over a student's shoulder and say, you know what, I'm not sure that that's safe or respectful or whatever your mantra is. And students can talk to each other about that, and parents can talk to their kids about that, and so on. So then the question becomes, what is your school's mantra or motto? And let's identify 3 opportunities that gives us and 3 cautions and so on. Internet user agreements. What should be in an internet user agreements? Most internet user agreements are created by adults for kids. And it's no wonder that they are somewhat reluctant to follow them. So let's ask students what they think should be in an internet user agreement. And how would they develop that, and how would they present it? Ideally, you would have some group of students, maybe it's an educational technology committee, maybe it's a student council, they come up with that. They have to take it to the rest of the school and say, okay, here's what we've come up with. Let's go ahead and throw this in some sort of social media conversation mode. Let's talk about that. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to come up with user rules and opportunities, and what should those look like? And then how would you implement those? What's real? Digital retouching. I love this activity with students because the new normal now is that everything we see is retouched. We used to be just incensed when someone came along and airbrushed a photo. Not so anymore. If we see an ugly photo, we say, hey, don't you have somebody at your office who knows how to use Photoshop? And I show them this example. There's me many years ago. And that went up on the internet. I didn't like it because my hand was in my pocket like that. So I pulled out Photoshop version 2.0 and I produced that. And I showed that to students and they said, I know, let's come up with a numbering system, 1 through 10, to describe the degree to which that has been altered. And that's just one idea, but it's a great idea. So we then turn to our students and we say, what rules will we have? You're in charge. And what are the opportunities and the cautions in even having those rules? And how would you even make some kind of determination about that picture right there? Is that a 3? Is that a 5? Great questions to ask. So it's all about putting them in charge.